Finally getting back to some football. It's crossover time. Locked On 49ers, Locked On Jaguars, the biggest storylines, the key matchups, and making some predictions here for Week 10, 49ers, Jaguars. Coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. It's that time again. Welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On 49ers. I am the host of Locked On Jaguars, Tony Wiggins, and he is Brian Peacock. And we are bringing you a crossover edition. And a friendly reminder, the Locked On Jaguars, Locked On 49ers YouTube pages is free for you to come and subscribe to. Just make sure when you're there, you hit the bell, hit that notification button. Also, make sure you hit the like button and then hit the notification button so that you do get notified anytime we drop an episode. And then if you're riding around in your car and you're listening to podcasts, rather, wherever you do that at, make sure you tap in every single day so you don't miss an episode. Today's show is sponsored by PrizePicks. This is the Crossover Thursday episode, is always brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And Brian and I would also like to say hello to all of our everydayers for being everydayers, and you can be one too if you just come back every day. What up, Peacock? It's been too long, man.
Yeah, how's it going, Wig? I'm pumped for this one. Man, you said in your cold open that it was about 5 weeks since the Jaguars played at home, and yeah, they've been across the world playing football games. It feels like 5 weeks, even though it hasn't been that long. Only one bye week. Both these teams coming off a bye. It's nice to get back to some NFL football and see some action from these teams this week.
It is nice to get back. And my man Crocker, Eric Crocker, who's your co-host, I was looking forward to seeing Croc too, man, because Crocker's all the way live. Had some other commitment, so we're gonna hold it down here today and try to bless the audience with a little bit of Peacock and Wig. How about that? I'm so used to saying Peacock and Williamson. You know what I'm saying? So I just said a little Peacock and Wig, just so it had a nice ring to it. Yeah. So I did my show, yesterday's show, and I talked about George Kittle. And the reason why I talked about George Kittle is because guys like that in the past have been nightmares for the Jacksonville Jaguars and his effect on the game. So for me, the biggest storyline, I know everybody wants to, from a Jaguar perspective, everybody wants to talk about how do you block the front four now that they have Chase Young. They're going to get the ball out quickly. I think the key is getting the 49ers off the field on third down. They are a rhythmic team. People love to talk about scheme, and I say that's an easy, tricky way to say that your team doesn't block and tackle well enough, because scheme doesn't matter if they can't get first downs, right? And they don't get into a rhythm. And I think the biggest rhythm guy that they have that keeps all of that stuff going, even without catching the ball, is George Kittle. I think he blocks, he catches, he'll have these monster games. Maybe doesn't have the same type of effect that Travis Kelce does, but he's a very unique player, and he scares the living daylights out of me, Peacock.
Yeah, and he was the leading receiver for the 49ers in the last game they played, but that was with Debo out, and it's been sort of, week to week a different player. A lot of Christian McCaffrey, obviously, but Crocker and I have talked about a lot of Locked On 49ers. Like there's no reason George Kittle should not be getting 10 targets a game, and maybe it's a little reminder that he could be someone who's featured a little bit more like he was in the last game for the 49ers. And if you just looked at his stat lines, you might not realize how good of a player he is. But when you watch him play, you appreciate how he plays, what he can do as a receiver, after the catch, as a runner, especially for a tight end, and then his blocking ability as well, and just the way he plays. He's one of those cornerstone players. He's one of those players that other players on the field feed off of. So yeah, he's one of the most important players on the team, and absolutely would like to see him get targeted a little bit more. So maybe that'll continue now. And look out for him in the red zone too, because I don't remember how many touchdowns Brock Purdy has thrown now, but when he had 22 touchdowns, which is a couple of weeks ago, 10 of those had gone to George Kittle. So he looks for him in the red zone, if not as much as he used to between the 20s, or at least not as much as Jimmy Garoppolo used to in between the 20s. And I think it'd be smart for Kyle Shanahan to feature Kittle as the number one read in some pass plays a little bit more often because he's that good.
So the Jags have won 5 in a row, right? And when you're pulling for a team, you want them to win 5 games in a row. You want them to win as many as you can in a row. But then when they play a really good team, you're like, God, I wish that, I wish they'd have lost one along the way, because I think, this is the formula where this is one that they would lose. And the 49ers are too damn good to have 3 straight losses, right? So you almost think from that formulaic point of view that this is a disaster. Ain't no way they're going to win 6 in a row and they're going to lose 4. I don't know if we can do that this time, because this game, there's a reason why the Jaguars have won 5 in a row, and there's a reason why. I think it's injuries, but I'll let you tell me a little bit more why the 49ers have not won more games as of late.
And for the 49ers, the biggest storyline this week is that Steve Wilks, defensive coordinator, is now moving down from the booth to the sideline to call plays for the defense this week. And that tells me that they don't really have a good answer, because I don't think that's the answer. I think they're kind of grasping at straws with some of these things. And injuries are part of it. But the 49ers, I mean, there's 29 other teams in the NFL that would love to have the 49ers problems with who they were still left with on the field, even during these 3 losses. So not having Debo, who's back at practice this week and is full go now. So Debo Samuel's good and he's going to play. Trent Williams being out as well. The combo of those 2 guys has hurt the 49ers offense, hurts the short passing game with what Debo can do with the catch and run stuff. He's always a big part of the game plan for Kyle Shanahan. Debo always gets the ball early, always gets the ball in the first drive, whether it's an end around, a jet sweep, a slant, whatever it is, a screen, he's going to get the ball and he's going to be featured. But Trent Williams has been a pretty big loss, and usually one offensive lineman, because I always think of offensive line as one unit. It's 5 guys. It's one thing. How good is your offensive line? That's usually my question, not how good is this player, how good is this player, and how good is this player separately. But losing Trent Williams has been a pretty big factor for the 49ers, and he's still not at practice this week. And the 49ers are not going to be without their starting left guard, Aaron Banks, as well. He's got turf toe. So the 2 starters on the left side of the line are very likely not going to be playing for the 49ers. We'll see if with Trent Williams, they've called it a sprained ankle. I think it's a high ankle sprain is what's really going on with Trent Williams. And so it's been tough for him to get back on the field. Still not practicing this week as of Wednesday. Still has some time to get a limited practice in and get on the field this weekend, but it's looking like he's not going to play. And that's not great for the 49ers, because that affects the run game. It affects the pass game, affects how quickly pass rushers to get in the backfield with Brock Purdy. And the Niners have faced the gauntlet of pass rushers this year. They've faced Myles Garrett and TJ Watt and Micah Parsons. They faced all of them, and
Danielle Hunter. Yeah,
Danielle Hunter as well. Yeah. So they've done a pretty good job. Watt got back there quite a few times, and they just beat the heck out of the Steelers in so many other ways that it didn't matter. But that's not an ideal situation, because that affects the run and the pass for the 49ers. So that hasn't been ideal, but they should be able to work around that. And they haven't the last few weeks. So I think the big storyline with the 49ers is right now, Steve Wilks feels like he's being a little bit of a scapegoat, because the offense has still only scored 17 points the last 3 games in that losing streak. And I don't know if they exactly have the answers. I mean, the players are there, and Kyle Shanahan said, well, the answers are in the building, but I think it's just circumstance. And sometimes teams do that, and it's cyclical. And the 5 weeks into the season looked like the 49ers could do no wrong and weren't going to lose a game all year. But we knew it was like, they're not going to go 17-0 most likely. And it's like, okay, yeah, now you lose 3 in a row. You regroup. The bye came at a great time. Brock Purdy bumped his head a few times. He was in concussion protocol a couple of weeks ago. So I think it was a really great time for the 49ers to be on that bye, be rested, and just refreshed. And, I think just hitting the reset button a little bit is really what the 49ers needed here, because Steve Wilks wasn't the one out there missing tackles, and the 49ers don't miss 30 tackles in 3 games like they had the last 3 weeks. So that's one thing that I think is just going to come back down and be a positive regression for the team.
By the way, Steve Wilks is a very, very good football coach too. So a lot of times guys get blamed for stuff because they're new a little bit to a situation, and because it doesn't look like it used to look in the past. But I want to talk about, you mentioned Brock Purdy. I want to talk about him. I called him, I didn't say his first name right yesterday on my podcast, and I got corrected. But
disrespectful to Brock Purdy.
I know it, right? But people have been disrespectful to him, and they've been disrespectful to Trevor Lawrence, because a lot of talk about generational or franchise, and folks just don't look at results all the time. Sometimes they, do this with whatever their imagination was about a player, and they never let that stuff go. So I think we were 10 years in Tom Brady's career before people stopped mentioning where he was drafted. And I will do that here in segment 2, where we talk about the biggest matchups, and we're going to start with those quarterbacks. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. First, I have to let you know about DoorDash. Everybody that listens to my podcast knows that I have been talking about DoorDash as of late because I was restricted to the house because of injury. And not only that, I then had a loss in my family, and folks were just sending me all kinds of stuff from our favorite restaurants, local restaurants, not just the chain restaurants, but the little pizzeria that's 5 minutes down the road that does not deliver to my area because it's a new area. Well, guess who did? DoorDash. You can do the same thing and get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms apply. Now I'll read that again. Get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKED23. Make sure you tap into DoorDash to make your life a whole bunch easier.
All right, here we go. Continuing this Locked On Podcast Network crossover episode, we got Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars and Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers. Make sure y'all check us out on the socials at Shop Talk and Wig and at BD Peacock. You can hang out with my co-host on social as well, Eric_Crocker, even though he's not here with us today. So biggest matchups in this one. I want to continue on this talk of the 49ers front because going up against the Jaguars defensive front, obviously Josh Allen can rush the passer. By the way, you want to take a little walk down memory lane with me real quick, Wig, because this just dawned on me. Back in 2019, there was a lot of folks that are fans of the 49ers that were saying, yeah, maybe they should go with Josh Allen with the number 2 pick and not Nick Bosa, or maybe Quinnen Williams. But Josh Allen was really popular amongst 49ers fans, and I liked Josh Allen a lot. I thought, obviously the pick's going to be Nick Bosa. You can't go any other way here. But I like Josh Allen a lot, and his career hasn't been exactly, he hasn't been defensive player of the year like Nick Bosa has. But he's been really good, and I feel like he's having a really good year this year. So no Trent Williams. You got to protect your guy, Brock Purdy, right? So I think the ball's going to come out quick. I think the ball's going to come out quick on both sides. But aside from that, the Jaguars front has been really good stopping the run this year. And the 49ers are going to want to try to run the football. So the best thing the Jaguars can do is make the 49ers one-dimensional and then get after him with Josh Allen in the pass rush. So talk to me why the Jaguars defense has been so good stopping the run this year.
Well, we'll start with him. Josh has been their best player on defense this year. I think it's 9 sacks. He's like at the top, right, either first or second in sacks. The thing is though, with Josh, he had a really good rookie year when they had Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue. Now, to show you how we got to this point where he's playing on his 5th-year option, the fact is that he got to the 5th-year option and didn't get an extension when all the other guys that are superlative, like the Myles Garretts of the world and of course, Nick Bosa, nobody's letting him get that far. It's like letting a first-round quarterback get to his 5th year and actually play through. It just doesn't happen, right? Because there's been a lot of trepidation about what he was, whether he was a number 1 or a number 2. I even, in fact, had to argue with some local media people about 2 years ago that he wasn't as good as Nick Bosa. And he's not. That's just not who he is. He's more of a really, really good 2, but he's in a contract year playing like a number 1, right? So he has these games where he's had multiple sacks. He had 3 in one game, 3 in another, and then 2 in another. So, but don't mistake that for saying that he hasn't played well, because he has. He's gotten a lot of pressures. Today, I heard Robert Saleh say something about Quinnen Williams. He says sacks are overrated. It's the most overrated stat. It's about pressure. It's about guys wrecking game plans, and that's what Quinnen Williams does. That's exactly what Trayvon Walker does too. But nobody wants to hear it because everyone is once again hung up on, well, he was the number 1 overall pick, as if these drafts are monolithic, right? As if he was the number 1 pick in the draft where they had Trevor Lawrence, or if he's the number 1 pick where they had Drake May and Caleb Williams. No, he was in the number 1 pick in a draft where you were going to either take Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati or Icky, the kid from NC State. That's pretty much what you had, right? They weren't taking Kayvon Thibodeau. I think with some personality stuff. I think they were wrong about that, by the way. This kid has done exactly what he's done at Georgia. Mike Tomlin said it a couple of weeks ago. Y'all don't talk about stats. I'm talking about the physical punishment that he administers on a daily basis. Now, we can go back and argue whether or not you can get that at the top of a draft all you want to, but make no mistake about it, there's not one real pure football coach that does not think that Trayvon Walker is a beast, and I'm in that camp too.
Yeah, he's a beast. It's just that when you get that number one pick tag, they expect fireworks and they expect, 20 sacks. They expect that kind of production, and that just might not be the type of player that he is. Are they moving him around? Because I saw a guy who was like, man, this guy should be playing inside a lot too to utilize his full skill set.
I like him. You know what? If he was a defensive end in a 3-4 like J.J. Watt, he's not that much smaller. He's 6'5", 275 pounds, man, and runs a 4.4 and has arms as long as you ever want to see.
Mm-hmm.
He does get moved around a little bit on passing downs when they go to a 4-man front. But a lot of times he stands up on the outside and he even drops back into coverage. He's very instinctive in coverage. He's a former basketball player. He gets his arms up, he tackles really well in the flat. So one of the ways the 49ers might combat that edge rush is to continuously run guys out in the flat and throw quick passes and make those ends have to go and protect that area. Because, you miss a tackle on Christian McCaffrey, he could be gone. So they do move him around a lot, but you'll see in that game, if you just you won't even have to do it very long. Watch 2 drives and just watch number 44, and you'll go, okay, that's what Wig was talking about. Because there's small things that show up that coaches love that fans don't. But when you watch the tape and you go, damn, that dude, he's physical. And players probably get sick of him hitting them because he's always coming in with that extra steam and that extra mustard. So it's going to be intriguing how they do with Brock Purdy. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, you couldn't turn on your TV without hearing Brock Purdy. Is he a franchise quarterback or is he not? Now everybody's peacocking, no pun intended, but everybody's peacocking because he struggled for 3 weeks and the team is lost. And they're going to see what I tell you. And then with Trevor Lawrence, me and Richard Sherman were tweeting one night on the Thursday night game, and he goes, he hasn't been great. And I'm thinking, like, the dude had 26 touchdowns and 8 picks last year. What do you mean he hasn't been great? He had 4,000 yards and complete 68% of his passes. What do y'all want? I think they embellish how good Andrew Luck was his first 2 or 3 years. Wasn't like that. They embellish how good Peyton Manning was his first 2 or 3 years. Wasn't like that. So this kid's numbers are stacking up pretty well for his career, but he just doesn't satisfy people. What do you guys in the media and the fans think about both of those quarterbacks, Purdy and Trevor Lawrence?
Oh, wow. Well, you're touching on something because it's basically been Lord of the Flies since like 2021. In fact, I know the exact day. It was March 26, 2021. It was the day that the 49ers traded up in the draft. And they went up to number 3, and you realize, okay, they're going up to get a quarterback. So from that day forward, it was like, okay, you got Jimmy. He's taking you to a Super Bowl, injured too much. They're clearly looking for another quarterback. So which one is it? So then you had camps of pro Mac Jones, you had pro Justin Fields, you had pro Trey Lance. And then by the end of it, most people are like, just please not Mac Jones. And it was Trey Lance. I was the Justin Fields guy at the time. I just thought the upside was there. But I liked Trey Lance, and I thought Mac Jones was the second round guy. So I was like, no way you're trading up to number 3 for Mac Jones. They went with Trey Lance. And then it was, okay, well, now there's the people who still love Jimmy G. So now it was Jimmy versus Trey Lance. So that went around for a couple of years. Then Jimmy goes away. But then Jimmy doesn't go away because they ended up not trading him. So they ended up keeping him and re-signing him back. And so now Jimmy's back, and then Trey gets hurt, and then Jimmy. And so it's been nonstop arguing amongst fans about who should be the quarterback, who's good, who's not good. Then Brock Purdy shows up out of nowhere, and they're like, wait a second. So all the Jimmy lovers were like, oh, well, we still hate Trey Lance, so now we love Brock Purdy. But then the other half still, now that love Trey Lance, are like, well, you got to give the young guy a shot. We hate Brock Purdy. And so that's still going on. And so there's a lot of people that really want to see Brock Purdy fail, even amongst 49ers fans sometimes. And of course, it's going to take a long time for a guy who's the literal last pick of the draft. If the 49ers didn't take him, he wouldn't have got drafted. And it's going to take some time for people to be believers. And he's not the most physically gifted guy, right? But there's something to him, and it's been pretty fun to watch. And he has played the best quarterback the 49ers have seen in the Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch regime. He's been awesome. He does have some limitations with the arm. That's why he's developed such a great ability to to be to throw with anticipation, and it's got him in some trouble where a receiver maybe takes too long, a little extra stem on the route, and isn't where he thinks he's going to be, ends up throwing an interception. But it's because he's got this unbelievable anticipation. Ball comes out quick, where it needs to be, on time, and then he's been more of a playmaker than I expected out of Iowa State too, with that ability to run. He's got a quickness about him, get out of the pocket, can make a play, and he's got some toughness too for not being a big guy. So you might look at him and say, is that a school teacher or an NFL football player? I can't tell, but he's got some toughness. He's got some ability, and he's been really good. It's going to take, he still hasn't, he's still basically on his rookie year as far as playing. He still hasn't played 16 games in the NFL. So I don't know exactly what Brock Purdy's going to be, but I'm a believer because he's really fun to watch. But he's not, he just doesn't have that star level physical ability and star level arm. So there's going to be skeptics until he starts winning championships like Joe Montana did, who, by the way, didn't have that superstar stature or superstar arm either. But you have to have some other really special qualities to overcome that at times. And he does have some of those qualities. And as far as Trevor Lawrence, I think everyone loves Trevor Lawrence. And a lot of people are like, well, why didn't they try harder to just go up to number 1 instead of going up to number 3 in that draft and just ending all the debates and just drafting Trevor Lawrence? I don't know if the Jaguars were answering phone calls at that point, but yeah, I think a lot of 49ers fans really like Trevor Lawrence. And I think a lot of the Lawrence stuff is just, if you're not Patrick Mahomes, and you're just never going to get that kind of credit, So I think there's a ton of teams. I talked about how there's 29 teams that wish they had the 49ers problems. There's maybe 29 or so teams that wish they had Trevor Lawrence right now.
No doubt about that. We're going to talk about win predictions, how the teams can win. If you want me to give a score, I'll give a score in segment 3. We'll talk about something else in segment 3 too. I got to ask this. How has this front office been able to survive with the Trey Lance situation and then taking Solomon Thomas over the LeBron of the NFL and Patrick Mahomes? I'm going to talk about all of that in segment 3 with Brian Peacock and let him answer that question. We'll do it in just a second here on a crossover edition of Locked On Jaguars, Locked On 49ers.
Let's talk about Jase Medical in the Jase case. Whether you're on an extended travel and maybe you're going to travel to a place that doesn't have cell reception and you need to make sure you have all the medication or certain things that your family might need in an emergency situation. Maybe you're bracing for a major weather event that can happen in a number of places around the country and around the world. Maybe limited by another supply shortage, or you are covered when it comes to Jase Medical, thanks to our partners at Jase, who have life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications that can be ordered in a 1-year supply in advance. Even ED generics for Cialis, Viagra, and more of those prescriptions, are also available at jasemedical.com. All you got to do is you go online right now at Jase Medical to receive your 12-month supply of your daily medication. And remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. Verified customer had this to say about Jase, quote, "I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to have my pills not available and had to cut them in half just to have enough of them. And I ordered most of my daily meds with a 1-year supply. I also ordered the antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone," end quote. So if you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jasemedical.com and see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase, jasemedical.com.
All right, rolling along here, segment 3 of Locked On Jaguars and Locked On 49ers. We're all locked in to a crossover show. That's what we do, but I have to let you know first that Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Tanitra Baptiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. If you ask me, I'm going to tell them why the 49ers are going to lose this week, right? So find Locked On NFL Kickoff every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. And now I got to deal with Peacock after making those comments, right?
Wow.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I asked you a question before the break. We rarely do teams get a chance to survive hiccups in the draft, right? I look back at the 49ers draft history. I saw Nick Bosa, of course, I saw Debo, Brandon Ayuk, and then I saw a whole bunch of people that I don't really recognize from making a whole bunch of plays, right? But the 49ers have consistently over the last 5 seasons been one of those teams that I think could win a Super Bowl at any minute, regardless. I don't care if they're playing Kansas City. I don't care if they're playing these high-powered teams. They have the defense and they have the toughness to beat anybody when they're healthy. How have they been able to survive? Because normally guys get fired when they make these kind of mistakes.
Yeah, and I've pondered that a lot. There's some easy answers there, and one is you're going to NFC Championship games and you're going to Super Bowls anyway, so that's okay. You still got scoreboard. But why have they been able to do that? Well, one, I think one of Kyle Shanahan's superpowers. He's obviously a really good offensive coordinator. He's a great offensive mind. But he's one of his superpowers is the ability to identify and hire and develop other coaches. He's already hired 3 other head coaches in just 7 years. Multiple GMs have come out of the building as well. So 2 GMs, 3 head coaches have come out of the San Francisco 49ers system so far since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over. And because of the great coaching they've had, they're really good. And sometimes players even playing up. And they've also been, and this is the key when it comes to the draft, because yes, you just lit 3 first-round picks on fire when you made the Trey Lance move. You then spent 4 more draft picks, a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and a 5th on Christian McCaffrey. You just have to have a running back who turned out to be amazing in your system. But you'd already just spent consecutive 3rd-round picks on running backs who are non-existent for you. One of them didn't make it through his 2nd training camp. The other one right now is the 4th running back on the roster behind a 6th-round pick and an undrafted running back. And so you see all these early picks, and they did some really weird stuff. Reuben Foster and Solomon Thomas in year 1, Dante Pettis trading up for him, CJ Beathard in that 2017 class, Joe Williams, running back out of Utah, who everyone had character red flags on, quit on his team in college. The 49ers didn't have him on his draft board. And Kyle Shanahan had said, no, I love his film. I'm not going to be able to sleep if we don't draft this guy. So they ended up taking him in the 4th round. He never played snap for the 49ers. So The scouts had it right. They got to listen to him. So they've done some weird stuff. They've really traded up a lot for Kyle's guys, and half of those, or more than half of them, haven't worked out. In fact, most of them haven't worked out. I think Ayuk's been like the best Kyle pick. If you're trying to decipher who's really behind most of these picks, doesn't have a great track record there. But the 49ers have been historically great, the best in the league, and the best I can remember for any team at drafting rounds 5 through 7. You're not supposed to have star players, George Kittle and stars and starters all the way around your roster and your franchise quarterback drafted between rounds 5 and 7. And the 49ers have been able to do that. And if you said that Brock Purdy was a 2nd-round pick and George Kittle was a 1st-round pick and Talanoa Hufanga was a 3rd-round pick and Dre Greenlaw was a 2nd-round pick, you'd be like, okay, that sounds about right. So they've just gotten that value of the wasted early picks that they have made. They've gotten that value later in the draft, and that's really where they've gotten a lot of this talent. And then they have hit on some other guys early, like Bosa, and Fred Warner was a 3rd-round pick. Ayuk was a 1st-rounder, so they were 50% in that draft because Javon Kinlaw has been, you could say Javon Kinlaw has been a bust based on what you would expect a top 15 pick to be at the defensive tackle position for you. Injuries and inconsistency on top of it. So they've made some good picks. They've done some weird stuff. You would never. I remember talking to Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans, and he asked me, what are they getting in Rand Carthon, who they signed as the GM from the 49ers organization? What's the blueprint? And I was like, well, you can't follow that blueprint because you would it's improbable. You can't follow that blueprint that I just laid out. But what you can do is work together as a team, as a front office and coaching staff. And I think that's what the 49ers have done great too. So the short answer, they've won. So that's why they're still there. And the reasons they've won is not because of some of the early draft stuff they've done that's been super weird, but still a very good team. And their roster is one of the tops in the NFL.
Sure is. And the Jags are the other way. They have top heavy guys because they were picking so high every single year. Mm-hmm. You have the Trevor Lawrence and ETN and Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker and Devin Lloyd and all of those guys. So it's a tale of two different teams, but they're going to get on the field Sunday. And now we got to see who's going to win this game. I never root against the Jaguars when they play at home. And I'm not going to do it this time. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to go 27-24, Jacksonville winning a very, very competitive game that should be on national TV, but it isn't. But
They
a
should have
very,
flexed
very
this,
close
man.
game. Very
Man.
close game.
They should have flexed this game into prime time. It's just some shabby games in prime time this week. Some really bad games all across the schedule. But this is going to be a really good one on Sunday morning for us over here on the West Coast. And I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be pretty close. These are two good football teams. 49ers are on a losing skid. Jaguars are obviously really hot going into the bye, so maybe they got cooled off by being on that bye. Does that help the 49ers? I don't like that the home team is getting 3+ points. If you go to FanDuel right now, the Niners are favored by 3 on the road. So if I was a betting man, I think the smart play is to take the points and take the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I do think the 49ers are going to win this game. I think they're going to get back to playing the football closer to the kind of football we saw in the first 5 games where they looked darn near invincible. I do think it's going to be a lower scoring game though, too. And so the 49ers offensive line banged up. They're going to have a tough time running the football. The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be doing everything they can to make the Niners one-dimensional and put them into some 3rd and long situations. And so it's going to be up to Brock Purdy and in the passing game to put some points up on the board. And I think the 49ers defense is going to start tackling a lot better. And I think Steve Wilks is going to light a fire under these guys because they know that their defensive coordinator is getting scapegoated because they're the ones out there missing tackles and they're the ones that weren't doing their run fits well enough and not covering well enough and not tackling well enough. So I think the 49ers are going to be ready for this one and be a little bit angry. And I think it's going to make for a really good game and a somewhat low scoring game. So take the under, and I've got the 49ers by exactly 3 in this one. And I'm going to take 21. No, I'm taking by 4, 21-17, the final here for the 49ers.
So there it is. Close game both ways. 2 teams coming off of a bye. 2 guys that really like each other too. Peacock's my man, 20 grand, and glad to have you here, man. We need to do it again, even though we probably ain't gonna play a game for a few years. But always glad to have you. Whether it's
maybe in February. How about that?
You know what? I'm gonna be in Vegas too. See, I'm going regardless. So guess what? You might be right. Me and you, Crocker, might have to have us an adult beverage together, brother, because if that happens, I'll be very, very, very happy. And I know the 49er fans will too. All right. So for Tony Wiggins and Brian Peacock, check us out respectively on social media at Shop Talking Wig and BD Peacock. Also, please tune in to the Peacock and Williamson podcast, as well as Locked On 49ers that Brian does every day. And you can catch me on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On NFL every day on Locked On Jaguars, Fridays on Locked On NFL. Have a safe traveling grace to all of y'all if you're coming to the game. If not, enjoy it in front of your TV sets, and we'll do the same thing. Take care. Thanks for joining us. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars and Locked On 49ers.